Hello, my name is Caleb Wharton. I'm the lead level designer for Silver Dragon Studios, and today we're going to be going over Calcium Overdrive here and the final sprint. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up Jira while that's loading up. We're going to look through some of our my level 1 tasks. So I had tasks for level 1, level 4, level 5, replacing all the assets, and then a couple down in here that I'll go over at the end. Actually, I'll go over the first one to start. The intro level skybox doesn't render properly in the builds. The summary was that the skybox to the intro level doesn't render properly. The expected results, it should come in like a bright burnt orange alien atmosphere, almost like a little bit reddish. The skybox was coming in a little bit pixelated. It was a pretty severe bug. It should be fixed now. Let's go ahead and hop into the intro. And as we can look outside there, you can see that it's not, there we go, yeah, it's not pixelated at all. It should be fully functional in the builds, so that should be good. Let me go ahead and pull over to and start the level 1. So the start section on level 1, the player should spawn in a jail cell, an open jail cell in front of the player. The player runs past piles of bones, skeletons, and they see a hellscape in front of them. There's lamps, obsidian ground, gothic buildings, gothic fencing, floating islands, chains, skulls, skeletons. Again, a lot of these assets we reuse throughout the level, so you'll see a lot of the assets just honestly reused and put throughout the level like that. The completion criteria is that there is a jail cell with a gate. The jail building has a gothic structure. The ground looks like an obsidian pathway. There aren't any block mesh assets present before the start of Parkour 1. Lighting is bright enough to illuminate key areas, but dim enough to present the area as a warm hellscape. Alright, so you can see you're in this little jail cell right here. When you run out, you see the hellscape outside. See this, and then when you turn around, you can see it's a pretty gothic building here. Used a lot of gothic architecture. All right, pausing again, going back in here. We're gonna look through the Parkour 1 section before we start it. After the first jumping obstacle, the player mantles over some cliffs and enters a long building with a corridor that lets the player practice wall running and puts the player out at the entrance of the Combat 1 section. Again, about similar assets from what we saw in Parkour 1. A lot of gothic buildings there. So there's a mantle section with floating islands. There's a main hallway / corridor building that lets players wall run. The ground looks like an obsidian pathway. Again, there aren't any block mesh assets present before the start of Combat 1. Lighting is bright enough to illuminate key areas and dim enough that it still presents as a warm hellscape. So we're going to go back into this. Alright, so we can see the little cliffs here leading up, the mantles, leading into the building here where the player practices their wall run. If players fall right here, able to jump right back up, perhaps. There. And players are able to re-enter the wall run area right here. There we go. Alright. Now before we start Combat 1, I'll go ahead and read through it here. Okay. So Combat Section 1. The player enters through the area through a tunnel. After taking a lift up, large rock platforms and lifts take the player up. Again, using similar stuff. In this area, I kind of wanted some dead trees, some cage skeletons, kind of give off the little vibe that it's a combative area. There are 3 combat encounters. There's player guidance, leading lines by props. Parkour 2, all assets are present before Parkour 2, and again, Lighting is bright enough to illuminate key areas, but dim enough to still give that warm hellscape. Took away the cave right here, the little tunnel entrance, to have a more open entrance with some magma, like lava rocks. And here's the little floating islands and the lifts, taking the player right up. There we go. Alright. And now we're actually... That was the start of Parkour 2, so let me go ahead and start reading off the JIRA for this. After the player takes the final lift into Combat 1, they walk up to a building corridor, the building that we just ran through. There are various other buildings scattered on the way that the player needs to pass through. The lighting is all replaced with layups and finalized lighting assets. Again, using about similar assets to keep the same type of feel. There's a corridor building that the player starts in section 2 with a wall run obstacle. There's a building with a curved wall run obstacle. There's a second corridor building with that hides a closing wall trap. The ground looks like an obsidian pathway. There's no block mesh present before Combat 2, and the lighting again is bright enough. I'm gonna go through here. This first area is the curved wall run, and the building right here that hides the closing trap. All the lighting should be replaced with the lamps. And coming up to the second curve wall run over here, taking the player into the lift and getting him into Combat 2 here, which I'll go ahead and read through. Oops. Alright, so Combat 2, after mantling at the end of level 1, the player has to take a path leading, oh my lord. After mantling at the end of level 1, the player takes a path leading to what looks like a dilapidated building. There are multiple ranged towers and fallen pillars blocking the player's pathway. You use the swords and ground, various stones, broken architecture, pretty much just making it look like a similar gothic building, but a little bit more broken. There's an entryway into the combat section. There are the main arenas that look like broken buildings. The edges of the combat areas are blocked by gothic fencing / railing. Again, the ground looks like a pathway. There's no block mesh present before the next area, the next section, Parkour 2. And lighting is bright enough to still present as like a warm hellscape. Entering in here. Kind of see some pillars toppled over. The railing around the edges here. Going from one to another. There we go. You can still kind of run into these back parts if you want, if the player wants. But again, this is kind of a speed router game, so if it takes away from their time, it's not the worst thing. Right, going in here, I'll go ahead and pause right here, right before he attacks me. And we'll look into Parkour 3. So this should be the final Parkour section. After the player takes the lift at the end of Combat 2, the player is taken to the entrance of a large building. With curved wall run inside, the path has 3 buildings leading to the players to Combat 3. Large building with curved wall run inside, hallway corridor that lets players wall run, a third building with a closing wall trap. Alright. Again, you can see here that I didn't use buildings for a lot of the curved wall runs, but I just rather kept them open since we had deliberated as a team that maybe having some more open sections along with the buildings, since we're passing from one building to another, because you'll be able to see right here how it looks when you just go from one building to another. You kind of have a small opening, but not a major opening in between these big pieces, and we kind of wanted to keep some bit of openness. Alright, and pause it again right before getting hit again. Going into Combat Section 3 here. After the player leaves the third building in Parkour 3, they will see a ranged enemy at the start of Combat 3. That's the ranged enemy that we attacked at the end of the closing walls. There's a player with a corridor that, or there's a building with a corridor that leads to the end of Combat 3. At the end of Combat 3, there's a tower island with a lift connected to the upper floating island. Here's some of the other assets that we use. Again, similar assets. We use watchtowers, some rocks, rubble, swords in the ground. There's a mantle section leading to the hallway corridor. That's the mantle section that we actually just got on. There's a hallway / corridor building that lets the players wall run. There's a final part of Combat 3 that has 2 floating islands tethered together by kind of chains and a lift. The ground looks like an obsidian pathway. There's no block mesh until the end, or no block mesh present from the end. Lighting is bright enough to illuminate like a warm hellscape again. Back in here. Oh lord. Jump! I'll do that. Here's the corridor. Alright, leading in here. See old Cal's already beat us up there. Come on, Cal, let's go. Oh, where's he going? There we are. This is the end of... Oh! This is the end of Parkour, or Combat 3. Which leads us into the end here. The players can press tab and get kind of a little hint towards the next level here. Alright. We'll go ahead and quit out to the main menu so we can look through level 4. Let me go ahead and pull up the gear for that. So that should be everything for level 1. Let me go ahead and show you in level 1. I just broke it down showing, or saying that all the finalized assets should be put in and replace the block mesh. Again, these are just the subtasks that I read through, all the completion criteria. And then going to level 4, it's structured about the same way. So it's just showing that the finalized assets should be in there, broken down into subtasks, and these subtasks over here. We're going to go ahead and start with the Calcium Actually, we'll go ahead and start with the start section, since the Calcium exterior we'll be able to notice when we're a little bit closer up. So the player spawns on rooftops in front of a portal. Again, using similar architecture, lamps, obsidian, stone ground. Instead of Gothic buildings in this area, we decided to go with some of these arena buildings that we found in an arena pack. So it was similar to the Colosseum architecture. And then we use chains, some skulls, skeletons, various other props to kind of keep the same similar vibe of that it's a hellscape. There's a mantle section leading into the first parkour section. There is a block mesh building that has been replaced with realistic buildings. No block mesh present before parkour 1. Lighting is still bright enough to represent a warm hellscape. Oops. Okay, we're going to go into first combat, or the first section here, the start section. Alright, so player spawns on the rooftops by a portal. There we go. Jumping in here. Here's the first curved wall run. You can actually see a lot of the palace exterior right from here as well. One of the main things that we did with that, with our progression, to see, so you can see those big points. All right, so alternative combat parkour 1. We'll go through we'll go through alternative real quick. After mantling the roof, from roof to roof, the player approaches a curved wall. Instead of that leads to the opposite side of the buildings, in a spirit path leading to a windstorm atop a building. The windstorm takes the player to rooftops, leading into a doorway to a corridor that has wall running. At the end of the wall run obstacle, there are a few ledges for mantling. that lead to a windstorm that takes the player to combat 1. Okay, so that is the regular parkour 1 here. There we go. Takes the lift up, goes over these little buildings, goes to a wall run area. And this is the regular parkour 1 here. And this takes them right into combat 1. I'm going to go ahead and restart the level, just so that we can go over... Oh, that was parkour 1. So alternative parkour 1 has the ghost path. They both use the relatively the same architecture, same type of assets. There's a mantle leading into the first wall run of parkour 1. Block mesh buildings have been replaced with more realistic buildings. Same with this. There's a mantle section that feels like climbing to different rooftops that leads to alternative parkour 1. Ghost building, there's a ghost building that players are able to cut through. There's a spirit path with a boost at the end going into combat 1. And the player and the block mesh buildings have been replaced. There's no assets that are block mesh before combat 1. And again, the lighting is illuminated enough. So we'll go into the alternative section here. There we go. Going up the left side. And then players are able to use their spirit stuff and jump right through, do the double wall run, and take the spirit path up here. Has a boost at the end, so it should lead players right onto this ledge without even having to do any extra work. So we already killed those ones. I'll just go ahead and go through combat 1. Combat section 1, the player lands on top of fortified encampment areas connected via chains to a series of enemy encampment islands. There are ranged enemy towers in the encampments. The encampments are all open and not closed off buildings. Again, similar architecture. In here you can see we're using some more of the Calcium architecture. There are 4 enemy encampments. The chains and grapples are easily accessible and players are able to move without being stopped by mesh collisions. The block mesh buildings have been replaced. There are no block mesh assets present before parkour 2, and again the lighting is bright enough to represent that warm hellscape. There we go. So this is the first encampment. If you go over this way, we'll just go the long way around here. There's a skip back. Oh lord. Oh my gosh. Alright, so there's a skip right there if you want to take the this way. Ooh. A little quicker over that grapple, because you get to skip this path, but this is a little bit of a longer path. There we go. Presented more in front of the players so that players are more likely to take this path, but if they've played here and they've seen the pathways that are presented to them, they know that there is a path out to the left that they're able to skip these other little bits. Here's the 4th encampment area, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then you have that small little connecting island as well. And then this leads into parkour 2, which I'll go ahead and pull up real quick. So parkour 2 actually has parkour 2 and alternative parkour 2. So we'll go through both of them. After the player takes the windstorm to leave combat 1, they emerge in front of a building that has a chain wall run inside. After exiting the wall run building, the players will see floating islands with buildings and small city circle area. Grapple points guide the players to the rooftops of the city circle area. More grapple points lead the player upwards to small buildings that prefaces a larger building where the alternative parkour 2 and parkour 2 paths meet. The last building is broken on the far side and opens up to a couple grapple points leading the player into combat area 2. The only things that I believe that we've changed to this, so here's again some similar assets. using some darker rocks in here. There's a building with wall run at the start of Parkour 2. There's a city circle area on a floating island is the main focal point of this section. There's a smaller building that has a curved wall run. There's a large building where both Parkour 2 paths meet. The larger building at the end of Parkour 2 is broken and weathered on the far side. The buildings have been replaced with more realistic buildings. No block mesh present before Combat 2, and the lighting is bright enough. The only thing that we've changed between Parkour 2 and Alternative Parkour 2 is, I believe, some of the building aspects, like how we did in the intro level. Instead of having the buildings merge right here, where Alternative Parkour 2 and Parkour 2 paths come together and meet, we decided to, or more so I decided to, make it so that it was more open, having some enemies leading into that combat section to kind of get the player ramped up, instead of having that enclosed space that kind of blocks off the player's view, I reckon. So going in here, we'll take a look. Also on this first zone, you'll see that instead of a building, I used more so a kind of a cityscape. It's almost like a little city here, to make it look like the player's running through these towers, these looming towers, and then they see another small city in front of them where you can grapple up to. We'll take the first parkour area. So let's say players miss one of these grapples or falls down. If players fall down or miss a grapple, oh Lord, you should be able to enter over here. The little bit of a low or a high kill volume there, but right here, grapple up that, pulls you up here, grapple. There you go. This is a little path if the players fall down that way. You're able to get over this path a little bit easier. I will take you back down and go the basic Parkour 2 route. Using the grapples, and then we're going to use the grapples to pull us up this wall. Again, this wall, try to keep it more open through this area, since we're going to be very enclosed coming into Combat 2, I believe. Combat 2. As you can see ahead, there was a enclosed building. We want to try to keep this level more open. Instead of having the building here, we did islands, branching with some characters on the pathway here. And then this leads into the 2 grapple points that should have been at the end of that broken building, but we decided to keep at the end of this section, leading into Combat 2. So I'm going to go ahead and take us back down here, try to avoid kill volumes, and get to the next area, or get back to this area so I can show you the stuff. Okay. Alright, going down Alternative Parkour 2. We can go from right here. So players will have to complete these chain grapples to get up to Alternative Parkour 2. Just because this was meant to be a section where it tested players' mastery of the the grapple system and chain grapples. So this was supposed to be like a more difficult puzzle for players to try to get. Same with the earlier section. The Alternative 1 was more of a section to test players' ability to use. Before going to that, testing players' abilities to use the ghost vision. So we're going to go ahead and pause. Go back into here. So we went through Parkour 2, Alternative Parkour 2, and Combat Section 2 leading into right now. The player lands on top of a fortified encampment area connected via chains to a large corridor with melee enemies. The large enemy corridor leads to grapple points that leads the player to land on another large enemy encampment where players can take Windstorm to Parkour 3, the Calcium. where there are ranged enemy towers in the encampments are all open and not closed off buildings. So again, that building that we saw is very open as well. We have a lot of pillars and no front-facing walls, so it's no like doors or anything like that. Just open building, so players don't feel super enclosed. Lamps, obsidian texture or ground textures, just a variety of different assets that we're trying to give ourselves like a toolbox to use. Completion criteria: there are 2 enemy encampments, combat to start and end. There's a large corridor that has numerous melee enemies. As the progression went on and we decided to add in enemy spawners, I decided to add in bomber enemies into this as well. And again, the block mesh has been replaced. There aren't any block mesh assets present before, and the lighting is bright enough. So going into combat section 2. Ooh, music's ramping up here. Okay, that's the first little encampment. As you can see with some of these spawning here. Just never mind, just mowed through them. But with the spawning, you can see the spawners kind of at work here. I think that, there we go, yeah. You can see some of them dissolve in still. Alright, so that's the second encampment area. The wall, so I'll go back through here. So we went through the first encampment there. This is the building pathway, the little pathway leading in. And then this is the final encampment. And taking the player into the windstorm, there's a checkpoint right there just in case the player misses this area. I'm going to go ahead and pause this. And we will look at actually the Calcium exterior as well. So I'm going to go through Parkour 3 and the Calcium exterior. The player lands at the front gate of the Calcium and is guided to the right, where they can slide under fallen columns and rubble. The right pathway is an upper ledge that's separated by archways. The pathway is scattered with ranged enemies, small towers, and platforms. Again, here's a variety of assets that we will use between it. There's a Calcium entrance. Parkour 3 resembles the interior of a partially destroyed Calcium. The area is well lit and guides the player with lighting. There aren't any block mesh assets present before the start of the boss fight, and the lighting is bright enough to illuminate the key areas. Alright, and then I'm going to go through the Calcium exterior as well, since we're going to kind of be right up on it. The Calcium is the main point of interest for level 4. The Calcium needs to have all block mesh replaced on it, on its exterior, while keeping a similar unique Calcium silhouette. As we can see kind of at the beginning of the level, we actually saw that. Again, similar building tools. Kept some of the Gothic building stuff in here instead of just regular Calcium architecture, just because I wanted to test whether or not they would mesh well together. After some trial and error, I realized that some of them worked, some of them really didn't. A little too dark for some of the stones. The Calcium exterior should have a familiar, distinguishable silhouette. The Calcium isn't casting shadows to help performance. The floating island has been replaced with a finalized flying island asset, and there aren't any block mesh assets present on the Calcium's exterior. Okay, so if we kind of peek around here, you can see it's all been replaced with finalized assets. Be able to show a lot better here in editor, but as you can see, it's pretty much that all the way around. We'll go a little close in here. Should all be finalized. And going on the inside, all the interior is also finalized in here. Okay, we're going into Parkour 3. So again, we landed at that front gate. There's a right side. We'll take the left side first, and then I will... I'm going to try to run through the right side. Let's do that. So there's this part. There's actually three paths in this way. I'll take you through all. There's the left side, very far left, which takes the players around this little spear path. leaves them up here, the scattered towers throughout here. Alright. And then takes them up through there. And then we're gonna go backwards here. We're gonna just do a little bit of backtracking. Shouldn't always be able to backtrack in these levels and stuff, but that's alright. It's a time game. The players will, if they're worried about their time, they won't backtrack too far here. Here we go. Alright. So again, back at the front here, the right pathway that we have, players can go under this column, and go up to this little mantle section. They just mantle these ledges, slide under here, and they're able to use a chain wall run this section to get up to this little ledge and mantle, where they can go over here. Again, lead by light, some enemies scattered throughout here on some cliff platforms that have emerged from the boss. Alright. I should have saved that for the boss fight. But this is the right pathway. It just takes the player on a spear path right down through here. And then we'll go through the third and final pathway, which is just an alternative pathway right here. In this pathway, these are all kind of merged into the same Parkour 3. It just wanted to give players plentiful options as far as choices for speedrunning. This game, a lot early on, we wanted to give players options for pathways speedrunning to choose which way was fastest. But again, going sliding under this pillar, players will slide under both pillars coming in. Instead of going this right pathway, players can go over, or the left pathway, players can come over to the right and run through here, grappling up, go into here, and these grapples should lead the players into the next, or kind of overlapping with the bar parkour sections right here, where players will jump off or grapple off, either or. Grapple off to get a little bit more speed, honestly, but then they'll go and lead them into the boss fight here. So now opening up the boss section. So the player enters the middle of an arena. The cutscene shows the boss spawning melee enemies. The player must fight through 3 waves of enemies to defeat the boss and finish the fight. The center of the Colosseum should feel hectic and dangerous, whereas the outside of the Colosseum should have more safety. The enemies are condensed to the center of the Colosseum. The boss will sit above and stand while summoning his minions. Some of the various architecture and assets that we use through here. Again, same issue with the Gothic building. Tried to use some trial and error and lean more away from most assets. The Colosseum feels destroyed. There aren't any block mesh assets present. Lighting is bright enough. The ground resembles a dirt floor Colosseum, and there's the center of the Colosseum. Alright, the only thing in here that has changed, I believe, is the actual boss logic. Since we changed it for the final fight in level 5, we decided to change it in level 4 as well to go along with it. So it's still a spawner boss fight where the boss has to spawn enemies, but it's not 3 specific waves. Rather than the boss has I believe a 40% chance of spawning enemies after he uses an attack, and then there's, I believe, a 20-second cooldown for that. Same with his fire attack. He has a 40% chance of using his fire attack after each attack that he makes, and then there's a, I believe, 18-second cooldown for that. So he still spawns enemies. There's no cutscene to start, but there's a cutscene to end, because we want to keep a flow going into this, and then kind of use the cutscene at the end to slow it down. You're reaching the end. This is the climax of it. Here's some lore of what's happening to lead the player into the next area. The center of the Colosseum, we decided to shrink it down since a lot of players were having issues tracking the boss. We shrunk it down to a smaller size to contain the boss fight a little bit smaller and give players more reason to interact with the enemies around them. So let's go ahead and go through it. Again, here you can see this is where how we shrunk it, just kind of having entrance and exit tunnels. These towers. The best way to counteract the fire in this area is to utilize the grapples, and that's something that I really wanted to stress to the players, is having these grapple areas that players can get out of the fire, and also introducing that the boss monolith here will heal the player. So if I get a little bit lower health, I can show the boss is trying to burn me, as you can hear. He's succeeding in burning me. Some more grapples in there. Wait for him to spawn some more. Then we'll use this. The dealing damage to enemies and killing enemies actually deals 50 damage to the boss. Hitting him with a ranged attack will deal 200. Basic attack should deal 100, and then the power, ground pounds, should deal about 100 as well. Let's see here, maybe if I can hit my shots, that he will now do a cutscene.
Now you can see me. Now you don't.
And then after the cutscene, this bridge lowers, and players are actually able to exit into this portal. Something about this portal that I wanted to mention actually was the entrance to the Colosseum. You are able to see this front-facing area and actually kind of peek in and see the portal. Kind of a little bit of foreshadowing for the player. If they're able to see the portal at this point, you're in level 4, so you should be able to kind of know when you're close to the end what the portals stand for in this game. I'm just going to continue through since we're going to be going over level 5. Pull up level 5's tasks here. Make sure that there's no other bugs in here besides these two. I'll go over. Go over the palace exterior. So the palace exterior has all block mesh replaced with finalized assets. The palace exterior is a major point of interest in level 5 and should be finished and fully replaced with finalized assets to provide an immersive experience for players. The exterior should look gothic, dark, and old and ominous, pretty much. Again, a variety of assets that we wanted to use for the exterior. Going through the completion criteria, the palace has a gothic, dark, ominous feel to it. The ground looks like a gothic stone pathway. The exterior looks finished and isn't missing areas to hide various hallways and pathways. There aren't any block mesh assets present in the palace exterior, and the lighting is bright enough to illuminate the scene and make it feel like it's a dim night scene. Alright, so there's the palace exterior. We'll kind of take a peek at that as well. I'm going to go through the start section and the parkour section because you'll see the palace exterior as we come closer, but usually it's past the parkour section that you'll start to see a majority of it. So the start section, players start on a broken platform in front of a portal. An archway with a gate is in front of the player. To the left and right of the archway are some floating islands holding gothic fences just to kind of block the sides of that. Here's some assets that we want to use throughout this. There's an archway with a gate. There is fencing to the sides of the archway. The ground looks like an obsidian stone pathway. Again, we used obsidian stone just because that was kind of our general feel. We wanted a darker stone pathway. Most of our pathways aren't obsidian stone. they're more so like a gothic tiled pathway, but again, that was just our general feel at the beginning of our asset additions. Um, Again, lighting is bright enough to illuminate and give off that night scene sort of feel, and there aren't any block mesh assets present before Parkour 1. Going into level here, we can see that we spawn up here, broken area, in front of a portal, big broken bridge, and it leads us into this archway that takes us up to Parkour 1, where we can see the massive palace in front of us. It kind of grabs our attention. We say, okay, we should probably head up towards that. Alright, going into Parkour 1 here. I'm going to go through both Parkour 1 and Alternative Parkour 1. After passing through the archway, the player traverses a broken staircase with floating walls and platforms. The staircase is missing sections / patches. Again, here's a variety of assets. Later on, we decided to, or I made a blueprint that had meshes bobbing, so we added those in, like some bobbing bricks and railings, other types of Gothic architecture that would kind of give the feel of this has been broken apart and these are just kind of floating here from the boss's strong aura. So there's a broken staircase, there's a Gothic railing on completed sides of the staircases. The ground looks like obsidian pathway. Again, block mesh is replaced, and the lighting is bright enough to illuminate these key areas. So going through here, Parkour 1, we're going to run up here. You see the railings on both sides. These walls are also bobbing up and down and moving at different speeds. Same with all these different meshes around, like I was mentioning prior. Grappling onto this. See some missing areas on this staircase below us. In this side as well, unlike prior, I decided to add some railings and some safety spots just so that players can feel like they can make this little gap without going too far off to the side too easily and falling off. So there's both sides, as long as the player chooses to go one of them. They can make this pretty easily. I'm going to go ahead and go back down, though, and start going to Parkour, or Alternative Parkour 1. And there we go. So Alternative Parkour 1 will start right here. I'm going to go ahead and go through the gear task for that. So Alternative Parkour 1. Alternative Parkour 1 has players grapple to a small building leading to an entrance of the Necromancer's Palace. The small building has a curved wall run inside and access to broken stone pathway and grapple points that lead to the palace's entrance. There's, again, all these variety of assets in here. There's a smaller Gothic building that houses a curved wall run. There's a broken stone pathway on the far side of the building that leads to the palace entrance. Instead of using just a broken stone pathway, we used the bobbing mesh with broken stones and some entrances, just a variety of the Gothic architecture to kind of give the feeling of the building being broken apart. The ground looks like the obsidian pathway. Block mesh isn't present before the palace's entrance and still bright enough to feel like a night scene, but dim enough to feel like a night scene, but bright enough to illuminate the key areas, I should say. Okay, leading in here, this Gothic building. The bottom is ripped out of the Gothic building. We added a lot of the floating stones and different architecture around here. The wall, the pillar, and then the grapples at the end here to get the player into the entrance of the palace and what will be Combat 1. So going into the board again, we're going to look through Combat 1, and then after we surpass that, we'll go into Parkour 2. Combat Section 1 is the entrance to the Necromancer's Palace, where there is a broken curved staircase and enemies scattered across them. There is a broken chandelier and rubble in the center of the area. There are also fallen columns throughout the lower area. The upper section to Combat 1 takes the player down a large corridor that has become broken and has a pit of lava under the broken areas. The corridor curves at the end and leads into a tower, which will be Parkour 2. Again, using a lot of Gothic architecture, skeletons, swords and ground, chandeliers, stuff like that. There's a Gothic entryway that looks broken and abandoned. There are 2 broken curved staircases. There's a main corridor at the end. The pathway looks like Gothic stone. There's a block mesh is all replaced before Parkour 2, and then the lighting again is bright enough to illuminate but dim enough to feel like it's night. Looking at the entryway here, we had this the door mesh that we used to kind of add to the bobbing. Added some little broken, uneven bits to the start here to kind of make it feel more broken and dilapidated for players. Going to the spiral staircase in the entryway here. After we kill these spawners, or all the spawned enemies. There we go. Alright. So we've got in the center here, instead of a broken chandelier, I decided to add it into the bobbing mesh so it just bobs up and down, and kind of also uses that leading line to point the player's eyes up top there. Kind of giving them a reason to keep exploring up there. Alright. There are 2 broken staircase paths the player can take. They can either take this way and go up here, or they can go back over this staircase and take this pretty much the same path using the grapple to get up. And once you hit a certain point, enemies, as you can see, will spawn in. Oh Lord. Oh Lord. Alright. After we've killed those enemies, now we're on to the upper part here. So this is the upper part of the palace area, or the combat area in the palace. This is the corridor / hallway with the lava flowing under. You see a very slow moving, gentle lava, a little bit more orange than the previous red lavas that you saw with the boss fight. Try to differentiate the boss's lava to make it look a little bit more menacing. The corridor leading into the tower, which is Parkour 2. So I'll go ahead and open up Parkour 2 and Alternative Parkour 2. So Parkour 2 starts in a small tower where the player wall runs up a broken spiral staircase. After they exit the staircase, they come to a hallway that's caved in and has grapple points leading to the next floor. The hallway looks diminished and old with rubble and columns fallen over. There is one last cave in that leads the player to the next floor, an entrance to Combat 2. Again, using a variety of these assets, different rocks, rubble, swords in the ground, using skeletons, Gothic railing, architecture, obsidian stone, and lamps. There's a broken staircase area that lets the player enter the next floor. There's a cave-in area that blocks the hallways and directs the players upwards to the next level. There's a column fallen over, and the whole area looks broken, kind of broken down and dilapidated. The ground, again, is stone pathway, no block mesh is present before Combat 2, and it's light enough to illuminate, but dim enough to feel like it's night. Going in here. I'll run you through this whole section here. Let's say players don't make it up this all the way. There's still this little catch platform that I added there with a grapple. So now we're in this main hallway, and I'm gonna go through here. If players want to continue their wall run up there, they're more than able to complete it without landing on this. But I decided to add this in here just in case players needed a little buffer, so you can continue going this way and go all the way around here to this little platform, or there's a lower section as well where players can come up to this. They can grapple onto that or grapple up onto this little side um, other side soul streams. So there's two soul streams that the players can get to before this cave-in, and this cave-in leads us into the parkour, or not parkour, but the Combat 2 section. So I'll go ahead and go back and take you through the other little section here, the alternative pathway. Alright, so I'm going to pause and go into the alternative parkour 2. Alternative parkour section 2 is a hidden wall that shows a snake path where the players must wall run to skip the parkour 2 section. Pretty simple, again using similar assets. There's a curved in wall run area with doors on both entrances and exits. The ground looks like a gothic stone pathway. There are no block mesh assets present before Combat 2, and the lighting is bright enough to illuminate, but dull enough, dim enough to still feel like night. Okay. When we enter right here, you'll hear the ghostly sound. You'll see the tombstone, so if you're pretty familiar with the mechanics of this, you'll be able to know that there's a pathway through here. Jumping through that ghost wall, we can see the curved wall run here. Add a grapple right here, and as you can see, kind of a grapple right there and a grapple outside. So if players want to use this grapple, they can use this to enter into the wall run, but they can also land on that platform inside and use that. Players can continue wall running around and make this this staircase right here very easily, but again, a little fail spot right here. If the players are a little short, they still have a way to get up with this grapple point. Coming to this tombstone again, at this point they'd probably know to use it and see that that's a fake wall, which leads them into this corridor right at the end of parkour. So, leading up into Combat 2. Going to Combat 2 section. Combat 2 is another broken spiral staircase like Parkour 2, except much larger. Throughout the broken staircase, there are scattered enemies. There are columns that lead from one staircase to the next. Some more assets that we use. There are broken staircase areas that have enemies scattered throughout it. There are columns leading from one broken staircase to the next. There are columns fallen over, and the whole area looks broken down, dilapidated. The ground looks like a gothic stone pathway. There are no block mesh assets present, and the lighting is bright enough. So we're going to go ahead and go through here. So here's some of these enemies on this broken staircase. Slicing them up. And then going up here, you see the first little area. And then continuing to go up, more enemies. I can go ahead and use them, just do that, send them off away. Going up here. There are actually two paths to this. So if players want to, I'll take the far path up this way first. So there's this path that leads players. No! So there's this path that leads players up into the top here. No! If I'm able to get the grapples right. There we go. Just use a dash there. And then this will lead players right into the next parkour area right over here. That's one of the routes in here. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can. So that is Combat 2. I'm going to go over Parkour 3. Parkour 3 is kind of what I went through there at the top. That's an alternative route. Not really described there in the actual Parkour 3 right here. So Parkour 3 takes players above the palace through another tower and sees the players descending in the final tower. That puts the players out in front of the boss arena or the boss area. The first tower in Parkour 3 is square, while the second is rounded and has broken elements to it. There are a variety of assets that we use throughout the levels. There's a square tower that allows the players to pass through both the top and bottom levels. You saw us go through the top. There's a second tower that is rounded and sends the player down in front of the boss area, as we saw earlier. Again, pathways look gothic and stone. No block mesh is present before the boss area, and the lighting is still bright enough to see, but dim enough to feel like it's night. We're going to go ahead and restart the level so we can see the Parkour 3 area, the base one. I already took through the top, so after that we'll just go straight into the boss. We'll just kind of speed run through here. Skipping through all these here. Oh. No! No! Oh no. Alright. We'll skip over here. Take the skip on that. We already know that's a ghost wall. Oh my lord. There you are. Back into combat 2 here. Oh! No! I hit it twice, I yo-yoed myself. Alright. Sending us back up. So here on the lower section of this, I'll save my power up for the boss. Oh my gosh. The lower section here, we're able to go and use these chain grapples to go a lower section. There. See, you can still see the upper section up there, but the lower section just gives players a little bit of a similar task, but a little bit more, it takes a little bit longer, pretty much. Instead of just grappling up there and getting shot across, the players have to use a wall run and do some more grappling. Alright, pulling us down in here. And then again, this will just launch the player down right in front of the boss area, which we will read real quick. So the boss section takes place in a separate building by the palace where the necromancer is in a broken down building. The building looks broken and abandoned, the floors look broken with piles of rubble under the broken areas. There's one entrance with many windows. There's a variety of the assets that we use. We use some of the stained glass up top there. There are 3 sets of stairs. There are cave-in / rubble areas that block pathways on the lower level. There are columns fallen over and the whole area looks broken / dilapidated. Gothic stone pathways. There are stone railings at the sides of stairs and upper pathways that aren't broken. There aren't any block mesh assets present in the boss area, and the lighting is still bright enough to illuminate, but dark enough to give a night vibe to it. Alright. Coming in here, start of the boss fight. We now have this little marker on him too as well that kind of helps track him. A little easier to track the boss now. And some of these enemies. We can also use our ultimate still and do damage to the boss by killing enemies in this level. So there's a variety of ways to damage the boss and kill him in here. Again, from the previous one, we're still going to be hacking and slashing and going after the boss, but this time he teleports and goes through multiple paths. And now he's down here. He's raising up lava that'll damage us. He's summoning them. You can hear from the rise up and rattle. Alright, there's three of the stairs right through here. So there's stair number 1. I'm gonna go over to stair number 2. There's stair number 2 right here. And then run around the top. And then here's the final staircase over on this side. So I wanted to kind of have one at the far end and each side for the player to go up, as well as grapple points the player can use to jump up here as well. Again, using the ultimate in this area is definitely the way to go. It offers killing a lot of those enemies down at the bottom while damaging him quite significantly. Oh man, he's back up top already. There we go. The nice thing is that the way that it's set up with the pathways is that you should be able to make as many pathways as you want here, and it should be good. Alright, so after the boss is dead, we get this portal, and after entering the portal, takes the player in here. Final cutscene. Where the player drinks some milk, and the game's over. They've found the golden cow fountain. They've drank the milk, made their bones strong. Bones of steel. That's level 5. That should be it for that. And then I'm gonna go ahead and go over some of these bug fixes that I had. So the boss section, we went over that. Went over the palace exterior. We went through the intro level light box. The controller look input. So this one, when using a controller, looking around is really slow and unplayable. Using the stick input to look should be more sensitive and allow the player to turn quicker. Plug in the controller, launch the game, start any level, use the left analog stick to look around and test it. So I might have my plug around. I don't believe I do, but I was able to test this, the look input for controller, and I didn't have any problem or issue with it. Again, this bug was pretty old. I believe it was let me see when it was made. It was pretty old, back in September. I believe that after working on it now, it was probably something to do with the frame rates that we were getting earlier on, which were a lot lower compared to now after we had optimized it. So yeah, no issues with the controller look input after further testing, so I moved that to done. Replacing animations for new characters. We'll go into one of the earlier levels, maybe level 1, and look at some of these animations. Alright, so the boss enemy animations were not added in since we didn't replace the boss enemy. Boss character was never received in a riggable model, so we didn't have a boss with a skeleton or anything. Still didn't have a boss with a skeleton or anything from our artist working with us. So we decided to occlude that and stick with the current boss animations and setup that we had currently. So for the melee, this is the description of it. Just goes through all the new character models should have their animations replaced with the prior character model animations. So pretty much just retargeting all the animations. New melee enemy character has an animation blueprint. New melee enemy character has a locomotion blend space. New melee enemy character has basic sword attack. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and go into level 1. We'll run into the first area here and test the melee enemies. And the first one we won't really worry about because he's in a volume that doesn't allow him to move, just a nav modifier volume. Alright, so we can see the movement is there. They have the move space. They have retargeted attack animations. Yeah. Okay, perfect. And that should all be set up through their animation blueprints. We'll go ahead and pause real quick. So that's 1 through 3 there. We have the enemy character has a looking 3D blend space, has a shooting slash or casting slash shooting animation. Okay, so the looking blend space, we'll test that out, and the casting animation. Okay, so we can see here. Jump. Yep. If we jump, he looks a little bit higher. This is low or medium. Let's see if I can go up through here. Oh! Let me see if I can mantle up this and still get him to attack. Yeah, so there. You can see he's twisting his body up a little bit compared to right here where he will... Hello? Hello? Maybe not. But he should be attacking you straight on from right there. So that should be good for his blend space, his looking blend space, and he has his casting slash shooting, which is pretty much tied together with the looking blend space. It's just the casting slash shooting twisted and warped, essentially. The only last one that we have is the new bomber enemy character has a explosion animation. Okay, so this... of which level? Lower Palace, I believe, has some bomber enemies in level, or in combat 1. Go ahead and we go over there real quick. Try to do a skip. No. No! Okay. If you spam space through there, you can pretty much wall run fairly easily through that. Okay. First section. I want to kill all of these other ones besides the bomber. I'm not worried about it, so you can see the bomber animation. Okay. So the bomber will come up, he'll shake. Oh! He should shake and then blow up. The other one blew up because he got hit by the other one's attack. Should be able to see it somewhere right here. So they can do chain reactions now. So if they blow one another up, they will do a chain reaction. And that should be the bomber enemy's animation, his little head shake. Other than that, I don't have any of the boss animations because they should already be in there. Didn't need to retarget any of them, and that should be all of the tasks for this milestone for me. So other than that, that's all I have to present. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye bye.